The Nintendo Switch is over 8 years old at this point, and over that time we've seen what's perhaps the best lineup on a Nintendo system ever. Series like Xenoblade Chronicles really finding their footing during this generation, classic series redefining their identity like The Legend of Zelda, action-packed titles such as Astral Chain, impossible ports like Nier Automata, and revivals like Baten Kaitos and Advance Wars, just to name a few. In the midst of so many great games and IPs, there is one series that I want to highlight today. One I wasn't even aware of its existence up until a few years ago, in a genre I hadn't really explored before. I'm talking about Famicom Detective Club. This video will be divided in a few short chapters. Short, I don't know how short, depends on how I manage to edit everything together, but that's my intention. We're gonna start with an overview of the series, going through its origins, diving into the remakes, and finally ending with Emio the Smiling Man, a game that is really unlike anything I've ever played before. In the final chapter of this video there will be spoilers for Emio the Smiling Man, but don't worry, I'll warn you again when we get to that part. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning. Famicom Detective Club is a text-based adventure visual novel series revolving around mysteries and the respective detective cases that Utsugi Detective Agency is hired to investigate. The series is the brainchild of Metroid's co-creator Yoshio Sakamoto, who, during his early days at Nintendo, got the chance to work for the first time as a scenario writer on this brand new series, being heavily influenced by an adventure game by Dragon Quest creator Yoji Hori called The Portopia Serial Murder Case, as well as the cinematic works of Dario Argento, who is famous for films like Suspiria, Deep Red, Phenomena, just to name a few. And so, in 1988, the first entry in the series, Famicom Detective Club The Missing Hair, was released to the public on the Famicom, which is the Japanese version of the NES. The game met the expectations set by Nintendo, and so the following year, Japan got a second entry, Famicom Detective Club Part 2. The Girl Who Stands Behind, which was released in 1989 and served as a prequel to the first story. Nintendo would revisit the series again during the next generation, with the Super Famicom getting a remake of The Girl Who Stands Behind. Additionally, there was also an episodic Satellaview broadcast containing a brand new story with the name you see on screen. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that. Again, this was limited to Japan. Now, the name of the protagonist in the series is a name that you can choose for yourself, but his canon name is Taro. Taro is a 17-year-old who escaped his orphanage and gets caught up in a police chase. In The Missing Hair, we find him waking up at the bottom of a cliff near the sea with his memory wiped out. He is assisted by a man who was seemingly just passing by. Later on, Taro remembers the case he was working on. As it turns out, he was hired to investigate a mysterious death surrounding an extremely wealthy family, which, as the story unfolds, becomes a series of deaths. The protagonist is joined, of course, by Ayumi Tachibana, loyal friend and co-worker that he happens to also have a crush on. On his quest to uncover the truth, Taro goes on his own journey of self-discovery as memories and new details about his past are slowly revealed. This amnesiac trope was something Sakamoto wanted to stay away from, but in the end he didn't have enough control over the project to make that call. To quote him, The Missing Hair was inspired by the concept of the Famicom Shonen Tenteiden, Famicom Boys Detective Team, and the idea of the protagonist having amnesia came from the external development team we were working with at the time. Because I wrote the plot based on those concepts, I never felt like it was the original story that I truly wanted to create. The end result was something that diverged slightly from my idea of scary. In the end, The Missing Hair is a good game, but one that doesn't necessarily innovate in a meaningful way. It plays it safe, being somewhat predictable at times, but still offering a few surprises, at least to me. Because of this simplicity, it's quite a comforting game to go through, even if the themes it covers are quite dark. After all, you're dealing with a series of murders. Being the first game in the series, it does a good job at conveying both in tone and presentation what a Famicom Detective Club game is. There is something to be said about how the murder cases affect the people and communities in which they take place. People gather to gossip, they tell you stories about legends. Some people avoid you while others are curious. Each place explored has a history behind it, and as a result the characters feel real. With The Girl Who Stands Behind, Sakamoto finally had a chance to work on his idea of scary for the series. And so, when the game hit the shelves of Japanese stores, it too was a success. Serving as a prequel to the first game, in this story we get to see a younger and perhaps more naive version of our protagonist as he escapes from the orphanage and gets caught up in a police chase. He runs into Utsugi, who takes him as an apprentice. Months later, the agency is called to work on a case involving the murder of Yoko Kojima, a high school student. You begin investigating the case, hoping to connect it to the murder of Genshiro Kaneda. With the help of two of Yoko's friends, Ayumi Tachibana and Hitomi Kawai, you come to learn that Yoko was involved in the investigation of the tale of the girl who stands behind. Admittedly, the second game is one I haven't really had a chance to play yet. After this period, apart from a few niche entries as I mentioned earlier in the video, not much was done with the series. However, to say that Famicom Detective Club was completely forgotten will be an unfair statement. After all, Ayumi Tachibana was a trophy in Smash Melee, which was one of the best-selling games on the GameCube. This served both as a testament of the impact the series had in Japan up to this point, as well as being the first taste of the series we had in the West. By the time 2021 came around, I genuinely don't know if anyone believed the series would ever come back. 20 years separate the release of Melee and the remakes of The Missing Hair and The Girl Who Stands Behind. 32 years separate the release of the original games in Japan and the remakes released worldwide. This is a long, very long time for a series to be dormant. Very few series have the luck of being given a second life, and even fewer do it so masterfully. In 2021, brand new remakes of the first two games were released worldwide on the eShop, with Japan getting a physical release announced as well. Being a fan of old anime from the 80s and 90s, I was immediately drawn to it based on the visual presentation alone. The games look stunning, with beautiful character models and backgrounds that feel really vivid. The characters always have this soft movement to them, which adds another layer of immersion and just looks really nice. Gameplay-wise, unlike a lot of visual novels, Famicom Detective Club doesn't have multiple routes. The only choices you make in the game are more in line with which character or occasion you choose to talk to first, but this doesn't impact the story in any way, as far as I can remember at least. Being relatively new to the genre, I appreciated the simplicity of these older titles. However, one major drawback that was then fixed with Emio is the hint system. The Missing Hair and The Girl Who Stands Behind are quite hard to get through without using a guide, even to this day. This breaks a bit of the immersion because at times you'll be so invested in the story and do what feels like the right sequence of dialogue options just to run into a wall because you're not doing exactly what the game wants you to do in a specific order. I guess by working on the remakes, I could feel Famicom Detective Club's potential to become what I really wanted to portray, and that I could achieve it. Also, I felt like I'd found the people I definitely want to work together with again, if there ever were a next time, namely mages. To cooperate with development and Miyachi-san, assistant producer, I already had them locked in. Mages as a studio is no stranger to the genre. They've been going strong since the mid-2000s, with their most famous works being the Science Adventure series. Chaos Hat, mainly Steins Gate, and Chaos Child are some of their most well-known games, with the latest entry coming just a few years ago. They've collaborated with Nintendo to bring Famicom Detective Club back to life with the remakes, and apparently they now rank amongst some of their best-selling titles. It's clear that the games performed above expectations because just 3 years later, we got this. Hello, Editor Me here. I got so overwhelmed by, recording a voiceover and scripting things for the first time that I completely forgot to mention the soundtrack. Now, every track you've been listening to is from Famicom Detective Club. The part where I talk about the original games and the remakes, it's a track from The Girl Who Stands Behind. In the part where I talk about Emio and then the spoilers, the soundtrack is from Emio. So you can listen for yourself and hear just how good the music is. I like the soundtrack in the remakes, don't get me wrong, but I think it sounds even better in Emio. Emio is more complex, it has more characters, it explores more complex themes, and as a result, the soundtrack reflects that. The tracks have that 80s feeling to them, which comes from the original games, while at the same time sounding very modern. Some tracks evoke suspense, tension, and fear through the use of synths, while some more relaxing tunes you hear during the investigation have a more modern, jazzy feel to them. Kind of like old school Gran Turismo, and if you play Gran Turismo, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, I just wanted to add a little section in this video to talk about the soundtrack, because honestly, it's insane that I didn't cover this in the video, so there you go. The soundtracks are incredible, and yeah, just goes to show how everything blends together to create just beautiful games all around. Back to the video. Last summer, the internet went crazy over this mysterious teaser, which then led to a lot of disappointment when it turned out to be a visual novel. I guess the marketing just worked a bit too well for them. I, for once, was one of the few people that couldn't have wished for anything better. The Switch was my first console since the PlayStation 3, and with it, I rediscovered my passion for video games, exploring genres that I hadn't tried before. Over the past few years, I've played through Phoenix Wright is Detective, Danganronpa, Paranormasight, Hotel Dusk, and more recently Another Code Recollection. I understand these are not traditional visual novels, but I think they are good titles on their own and a good starting point for anyone interested in the genre. The announcement of Emio the Smiling Man seemed like a logical step forward. By testing the waters with the remakes, it became clear that there was an audience interested in these games, both in Japan and worldwide. Hearing Sakamoto talk as he presented the games and what he wanted to convey with this narrative, it felt to me like a very author project, especially in the part where he went over the ending and how it will divide people. The previous two games, while being remakes and innovating in a lot of areas compared to the originals, were still held back by a few mechanics that were just a product of their time. In that sense, Emio is a significant step forward as far as storytelling and gameplay go, as it fixes the overall flow by including a hint system that helps you navigate through the story. Now, during dialogue, certain words will be marked in a different color, highlighting which topic will progress the narrative. So, no more need for guides. The UI has been updated once again, and if the remakes already looked good, Emio takes it a step further. Even the saving option changed. Now in the previous games, in order to save your progress, you had to click on Quit Investigation, which was misleading for a lot of people. In the entire plot of The Missing Hair, that choice made sense once, and I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but basically this is not the case anymore. So rest assured, you'll know exactly how to save the game from the get-go. In a sense, Emio is Famicom Detective Club the way Sakamoto envisioned over 30 years ago. While it's true that the series has always set its own standards pretty high, Emio so effortlessly takes it to a whole other level. Since the late 80s, Sakamoto has worked on countless projects, reaching a status in the industry that most people can only dream of. Metroid Dread, a game that was supposed to come out on the DS, was cancelled. 20 years later, it's now a reality on the Nintendo Switch. So for him to revive a game not once, but twice within a single generation, it's genuinely an incredible accomplishment, and I feel like people don't talk enough about him. As a result of all this, it's now possible to imagine that more Famicom Detective Club games will be released in the future, something that was inconceivable just a few years ago. Now, plot-wise, we follow Taro and Ayumi 2 years after the events of the first game, as they're investigating the case of a high school student, Aisuke Sasaki, who is found dead with a paper bag on his head. The bag has a creepy smile on it, connected to the urban legend from 18 years in the past known as Emio the Smiling Man. This legend refers to a man who shows up whenever a girl is spotted crying alone at night. He wears a trench coat and a paper bag with a smile, killing his victims if they keep on crying, and puts a bag with a smile on their heads to give them a smile that will last forever. Unique to this story is a whole new set of characters, of course, as well as some returning ones serving as Easter eggs for people who've played the previous games. Junko Kuze is a police detective working on the Aisuke case, and a character with a very strict, workaholic mindset and unfriendly attitude at first. Daisuke Kimahara is a police detective who works alongside Kuze and, opposite to her, has a more carefree attitude. He's serious when he needs to be, but for the most part, the duo balances each other out. Last but not least, there's Kamiharu Kamada. In every entry in the series, he plays a different persona. In part 1, he's a doctor, in part 2, he plays a teacher, and here in Emio, he's a police inspector overseeing Kamada and Kuze. What motivated me to start this channel and make this first video wasn't my desire to just tell you the story of Famicom Detective Club. My writing skills at the moment can only take me so far, and if you've made it this far, I sincerely hope you've managed to get something out of this video. After finishing the game, I felt a profound desire to just talk about Emio and how it made me feel. By the time I finished the epilogue, I was bursting with emotions. I cried a lot. I wanted so badly to talk about it, but none of my friends and acquaintances had played it. So, from this point on, we're entering spoilers territory. If you haven't played the game yet and you're interested in trying it for yourself, please consider stopping the video now. I can only hope that by talking about this game, I'll get at least one person to play it, and if that's the case, I wouldn't want to ruin the experience for you. You don't need to play the other games in order to understand Emio, as all you get, all of it, is just a bit more background information and some Easter eggs about certain characters that show up. So again, please consider giving the series a try, and yeah, just play it for yourself. I really appreciate you watching the video up to this point. Now for everyone else, let's continue. Aisuke, a high school student, has been murdered, and stories of an old urban legend have come back to life. Following Utsugi, you and Tachibana make your way to the scene of the crime. This is where you first come across Kamada, Kamihara, and Kuze. Kuze, in particular, doesn't seem to be fond of you, and even less of Utsugi. They clearly go a long way back, and the reason why this happens will only make sense at the end. Admittedly, there's a lot of things at the beginning that are intentionally vague, and imageries that have a completely different meaning once you finish the story. So, eventually, you make your way to the high school Aisuke attended. You talk to a few students who at first are quite shy about talking to you. You get to meet Tsubasa Fukuyama, a teacher at the school, which happens to know Tachibana, as he was her former upperclassman. He's quite the character with a sense of humor that adds a bit of lightheartedness to the story that you really don't see in most characters, while at the same time acting quite suspiciously. I never knew what to think of him. I felt like he was bluffing and trying to actively control my idea of him. Or maybe he really just was a silly guy caught in something consuming him inside. From this point on, it's Tachibana who spends the most time with him. Utsugi leaves to go investigate the origins of the legend surrounding Emio in a different village, while Taro just follows wherever leads he can find. Taro's romantic interest in Tachibana can be felt from the very first entry, and that's no different here, with him feeling a bit jealous of the level of closeness she has with her former upperclassman. Emio is a game of patience, where most of the game has you following clues that seem to lead nowhere, and talking to people who don't really want to tell you anything. It's a deliberate choice, of course. Unlike the previous entries and most detective visual novels, this story isn't about you. And the story would still come to its conclusion even if you weren't there. I've seen people point some criticism towards this, but in my opinion, it's a bit unfair. This serves as a subversion on the whole detective visual novel genre. This is a story about generational trauma, about the wounds we carry and keep to ourselves. It shows us how blaming ourselves can sometimes be the easiest way to rationalize a traumatic event, while also the most painful one. It shows just how fragile and sensitive our childhoods are to forming the people we become as adults. The epilogue is, as I assume most of you will agree, where the game really shows its true colors. For around 9 to 12 hours of playtime, it keeps its cards close to its chest, only to reveal it to you at the very end in the most impactful way possible, for a Nintendo game of all things. As you progress through the case, you get to meet Megumi and Kohei, who are longtime friends of Aisuke, and new things about him that no one else did. There is a moment about halfway through the story where Megumi, going through her own inner struggles, is brought to an interrogation room and admits to have killed her friend due to a sense of guilt stirring within her from the last interaction she had with Aisuke. Fukuyama is also put under the spotlight, and you soon come to learn the feelings Aisuke had for Megumi and how Megumi felt about Fukuyama. This recontextualizes the interactions you had with Fukuyama up to this point and serves to explore Megumi's anxieties and her inner conflicts as a character. In an instance where you're inside the school talking to Fukuyama, Kohei joins and talks about how he thinks Aisuke took his own life. When this is proven to be the case, it too recontextualizes a lot of things up to this point. This is, in my opinion, one of the best tools, narrative-wise, the story takes advantage of. By remaining relatively vague about most plot points and character backgrounds, the story can then capitalize on the player's expectations. From my own personal experience, I know how it feels to lose a friend your age and live with the fact that your last interaction wasn't a positive one. A part of your childhood dies in that moment. Years later, this is a burden I still carry, even though I've learned to live with it. The thing is, I'm an adult in my late 20s who can rationalize things in a way a 14-year-old just can't. The part of the game where I cried the most was when it was revealed that Aisuke really did kill himself. I saw parts of me in Megumi, in Fukuyama, Kohei, and Aisuke. You don't really get to meet him in the game. Apart from a few scenes where Megumi recalls their last encounter, all you see and hear about him is just an inciting incident that serves to advance the plot, and by showing how characters around him relate to him, this also serves as a forum to show us parts of those characters we wouldn't be able to see otherwise. Understanding the circumstances of his death pulled me out of the game and made me feel like I was crying over the death of a loved one. He was a young teenager, lost like most people in high school, like I certainly was. Someone with a future ahead of him, but he didn't get to have that future. His grades weren't high enough to get into a good school, and so he took his own life. In the Japanese society, your hierarchy and what you do for work really defines your value way more than it should. So of course, kids at a young age feel an intense pressure to perform well because they know how much this moment means to their lives. This is, of course, on a larger scale, a worldwide problem. I too, like many of you watching this, know what it feels to be completely lost at that age, and even in my 20s, unable to imagine any sort of future for myself, in a country that, personally, is much more relaxed about hierarchies than Japan. But the tragedy doesn't stop there, far from it. Junko Kuze is a really interesting character. She lost her parents when she was very young. She loved her brother more than anything else, but an argument leads to her running away at night. Crying at the side of the road, she's faced with Emio or Minoru, who almost kills her if not for her brother who comes running to her rescue. As a result, he's taken away unconscious, and from this moment on, Junko really feels like she's responsible for what happened to him. Does that remind you of someone? Now, this is the same Minoru who at this point had completely lost sight of who he once was. He saw his sister, Emiko, dying in front of him while trying to run away from his abusive father after his mother left them. Junko's entire motivation to become a detective is finding her brother. You come to understand why she is the way she is. Her wounds are the first thing you notice about her as a character, but in order to understand that, one must first take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Notice how one traumatic event is a result of another traumatic event. More abuse, more violence, more pain, more inner suffering, which then is unleashed and takes a domino effect. The bag associated with his persona, Emio, is the same bag that used to cheer up Emiko, used to make her laugh. It was the only moment of happiness they had growing up with an abusive father. Now, in the promotional material for this game, you can find this image. At first glance, it doesn't mean much to you, but looking at it after finishing the game, knowing that this is Emiko and Minoru, it's just so devastating. It's impossible not to feel touched by this, to feel a genuine sense of sadness. Because of all this, Emio does something to me that no other game has been able to achieve. It made me feel seen. It touched a part of me that no other game had before. It's not perfect, and I really think the pacing may throw some people off, but to me it's worth the wait. It's worth pushing through. It's worth going through those chapters where it feels like the story isn't going anywhere, where it feels like you're not really solving anything. Because again, this isn't about you, you're a spectator, and I think it takes a lot of courage to do something like that with a game like this. To me, this game elevates the video game medium on an artistic level I will always admire. This is a story I'll always remember, and for that, I'm so thankful. Now, I want to thank you for making it this far in the video and joining me on this journey. I would love to know what you thought about this game. Did you like it as much as me, or do you think the pacing really is that big of an issue? I would love to hear what you have to say about it, and if nothing else, I just want to say thank you for making it this far. This is my first video on YouTube, and it's something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, so I'm happy that I'm able to share this with you, and thank you for watching.